She's just a gate guard. No one listens to her anyway." That's what my sister told her bridesmaids on her wedding day. The words weren't whispered for me to hear, yet they cut sharper than any blade. What she didn't know was that by the end of the night, the same crowd would watch me do something none of them could forget. Before we dive in, let me know. What time are you listening to this? And where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. I didn't belong there. Not in that glass and gold resort perched above the cliffs of Newport, not in that linen dress that cost more than my first month's pay as a junior officer, and certainly not on the guest list that, until 2 weeks ago, didn't include my name. The invitation arrived late, folded into an envelope too stiff and too white, like it had something to prove. My name was misspelled. No rank, just Miss. Rowan Quinn, as if the last 15 years in uniform meant nothing. Laurel's name, on the other hand, gleamed in gold leaf. Laurel Pennington, Escadilla, her new husband's title tucked beneath like a satin pillow. Walking through the courtyard, where champagne glistened and the string quartet played something too delicate to carry meaning, I felt like a misplaced line in a poem. Everything was curated, down to the lavender floating in water glasses. I tucked my hands behind my back like I was back on base, trying not to flinch at every flash of a camera, and then I heard it. "That's my eldest?" My father said to a couple in navy blazers and silk scarves, pointing at me like I was a menu item. "She works security. Gate duty stuff, base checkpoints. You know?" They offered a faint grin, lips tightening instead of opening to speak. No one asked me a thing. They didn't need to. The sentence had already closed the door. I could have said something. I could have stepped forward, offered a handshake, mentioned my rank, but I remained rooted, watching the sun catch the rim of his glass as he turned away. I knew that move. He'd done it at my graduation too, stepped just far enough to miss the photo, said the lighting wasn't right. Someone brushed past me holding a platter of oysters. I took one, more out of spite than appetite, the shell slick and cold in my hand. Somewhere inside the reception tent, Laurel let out a brittle chuckle. Sharp, rehearsed. I hadn't heard that laugh in years, but I knew it instantly. The kind she used when she was winning. I made my way toward the edge of the lawn, away from the chatter, the perfect teeth, and the silent wall they'd drawn. The ocean stretched out ahead, quiet and indifferent. Just like the family behind me. The last time I wore a dress like this, it was for my mother's funeral. Navy blue, pressed flat, long sleeves even though it was spring. I remember Laurel standing beside me, hair perfectly curled, whispering to her fiancé about the caterer for getting lemon tartlets, as if Mom's absence was just another scheduling hiccup that was 4 years ago. Back then, I still thought maybe grief could make people softer. But at this wedding, I knew better. I kept near the edge of the tent, pretending to sip the champagne someone had handed me. My glass stayed half full the entire time. Each time I caught my reflection in the window panes, standing stiff, hands behind my back like inspection was moments away, I had to stop myself from laughing. I didn't belong here. Not because I didn't have a right to be here, but because I was never meant to be part of this family, not in the way Laurel was. I've been overlooked for most of my life, not in a tragic, novel-worthy way, just consistently overlooked. Like in school, when Laurel won first place in the state essay contest and Dad laminated the certificate, framed it, hung it in the hallway. I had a near-perfect GPA for 3 years. Nobody noticed until the Navy recruiter showed up with a form that needed a signature. "You sure you want to do this?" Dad asked, stirring coffee, not even looking up. "I already did the physical," I replied. He blinked slowly, as if that was the moment I became a stranger. Mom walked me to the bus that morning, drizzle slicking the pavement. I remember her holding the umbrella over me the whole time, even when her right shoulder got soaked. Before I climbed aboard, she said quietly, "You don't owe them your silence just because they don't know how to hear you." I nodded like I understood. I didn't. That memory lingered longer than I expected. Through deployments, through nights in the desert, through cold mornings doing checkpoint inspections. When I chose to be a military police officer, people thought it was about order or discipline. It wasn't. It was about choosing a place no one else was fighting for. No one wanted to be the gate guard, so I took it. "You've been scanning this crowd for 10 minutes, someone observed beside me. I turned. A man in his 30s holding a vintage Leica grinned slightly. "You're not mingling." "You're assessing," I raised an eyebrow. "Photographer's instinct," he added. "I can spot people who are watching for exits." "Maybe I just don't like shrimp skewers," I replied, but there was no edge in my voice. "Dane," his name tag said. He didn't look away. Didn't glance past me like most people did once they clocked. I wasn't part of the glossy tribe. He lowered his camera. "You've got a presence." Like you're waiting for something to break, I exhaled through my nose. "You get a lot of that at weddings?" "Not usually before the cake's cut." My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "You don't have to prove anything to them. But you deserve to walk through that door like you own your name." I stared at the screen a moment too long. It was always her voice that steadied me. Even now I could picture her hands folding a napkin just to keep busy. Her eyes reading the room faster than anyone. Would I have come if she hadn't texted me last week? If she hadn't said, "Laurel might not have wanted you there, but I did." That's enough. Maybe not. Maybe I would have stayed on base, found some excuse. An inspection, a long shift, anything but this parade of delicate cruelty dressed in cream and lilac. Dane tapped his lens cap back on. "You want to get some air?" I nodded. We stepped out onto the gravel path behind the catering tent. The sound of string music softened behind us. The grass was damp from the morning fog. I could feel it through my shoes. "Funny thing," he said after a while. "You don't look like you're here for someone else's celebration." I paused. "That's because I'm not." And just then, down the hill near the lot, I noticed Dad gesturing toward me again, speaking to a new group. I couldn't hear him, but I knew the stance. One hand tucked in his blazer pocket, the other flicking toward me like I was a footnote. "Gate guard," again. Probably said it twice this time. I should have turned away, but instead I stepped forward. I stepped off the gravel and onto the stone path that curved behind the reception tent, trying to keep my spine straight even as my heels caught in the cracks. The smell of gardenias clung to the breeze, too sweet, like a perfume sprayed over something rotting. Around the corner, where staff buzzed about arranging final touches, I spotted the seating chart propped awkwardly against a catering cart. The main board was elegant. Calligraphy on cream vellum. Laurel's name, centered. Beside it, a few rows down, mine, scribbled in dry black marker on a taped-on strip. Rohan Quinn, gate staff table. My breath snagged in my chest. The ink bled slightly on the paper, like the letters themselves were embarrassed to be seen. Someone had corrected the spelling once, crossed it out, then wrote over it again. Still wrong. No rank, no title, not even a space between the first and last name. A server brushing past gave me a polite smile. "Excuse me, are you with the security detail?" I blinked. "What?" He motioned to my posture, the way I stood with my hands behind my back, feet slightly apart. "You've got that controlled stance. Like you're scanning. I thought you were one of the external guest monitors." He didn't linger, just drifted past like I was part of the landscaping. A second board listed individual table placements. My name, misspelled again, was barely visible on a corner sticky note. Table 17, near the equipment rack. I followed the direction arrows through a narrow corridor behind the bandstand, where cables snaked underfoot and the hum of a backup generator cut through the music. And there it was. My seat was tucked between a mobile spotlight and the temporary bathroom station. A damp scent of chlorine and air freshener floated out every time the door swung open. Someone had draped a white cloth over the utility box beside my chair, like they were trying to convince it to play along. I ran my fingers over the linen napkin on the table. It was folded wrong, a different pattern than the others. No place card, just a leftover menu from the rehearsal dinner, scrawled with someone's initials in the corner. I turned it over. Grease smudges. Laurel's voice chimed out behind me before I even heard her heels. "Oh no," she said, her tone painted with too much sympathy to be real. "Did they really seat you over here? That's awkward." I turned slowly. Her dress gleamed like something torn from a bridal magazine. Soft curls framed a smile that never reached her eyes. "It's fine," I said. She stepped closer, tilting her head as if inspecting a museum exhibit. "Honestly, you're probably used to this kind of setup. Tight quarters, back of house. It's more your vibe, right?" I watched her hand gesture lightly toward the utility lights, like it was all a harmless joke, like I hadn't stood in formation at military funerals, under harsher lights, in tighter corners, without once complaining. "Wherever I sit," I said quietly, "I usually earn my place." She released a clipped chuckle, one sharp note, and laid a hand gently on my shoulder. "Don't be dramatic. I mean, you came. That's what matters. We were all so surprised." She lingered on the word surprised like it tasted expensive. "You mean you were surprised?" I replied. A pause. Her smile stiffened. "Let's not do this," she said, glancing around as if the tent walls had ears. "It's a wedding." "No," I answered. "It's your wedding." Laurel's eyes narrowed just slightly, only for a second, like a flicker behind a veil. "You're not going to make a scene, are you? That's not really your style." I stared past her, toward the crowd of guests sipping champagne under chandeliers they'd brought in just for the weekend. My voice stayed low. "I don't have to make a scene." "You already wrote it." I brushed past her, back toward the path, but not quickly, each step measured. I didn't need her permission to walk away. The light shifted under the tent, and someone started tuning a cello. The soft whine of strings rose as I reached for my phone again. No new messages, just my mother's last one, still glowing. "Don't lower your eyes." They were never above you. I slipped through the linen partition behind the dessert table and found the balcony that wrapped along the second-floor lounge. The ocean hissed below, dark and constant, like it knew how to keep secrets. I leaned into the railing, not looking back at the glowing tent or the perfect white chairs lined up in rows like obedient little soldiers. The air was cooler out here, salt and stillness. A soft shuffle behind me. I didn't turn. "You've got that look," Dane said from somewhere near the French doors, "like someone trying to count how many exits are in a burning room." I huffed a short breath. Occupational habit. He stepped beside me, not crowding, just close enough to hear without me raising my voice. I noticed he wasn't holding a camera this time, just a jacket slung over one arm and a single chocolate-covered strawberry pinched in a napkin. "You always vanish after cake?" I asked, glancing sideways. "I don't do well with coordinated dances and open bars," he replied. "Besides, the real stories are out here." I tilted my head toward him, eyebrow raised. He smiled. "Like that moment you and Laurel stood by the gift table earlier. You both smiled, nodded. But your shoulders were speaking a whole other language. You ever notice that? Your sister talks to you like she's afraid if she blinks, she'll say what she really thinks." That landed harder than I expected. Dane looked away quickly. "Sorry, that was blunt." "No," I murmured. It was accurate. We stood there for a beat, just the ocean and the faint murmur of strings from below. Then he cleared his throat. "I actually came up here to charge my phone," he said. "Found a quiet hallway, or so I thought." Opened a door without knocking. Apparently, it was the bridesmaids' changing room. I turned my head fully now, eyes narrowed. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," he said, "but I heard Laurel." She was talking to one of the bridesmaids. "Something about you." My fingers curled around the edge of the railing. "She said." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to keep going. She said, "I only invited her because of Mom." Gate guard, remember? No one's going to believe a word she says if she loses it during the reception. My eyes stayed fixed. The words didn't sting, they sliced. Not because they were new, but because they confirmed something worse. They'd expected me to break. "They think I'm predictable," I said, voice steady. "They've rehearsed my humiliation. Even if I speak up, it'll sound like a tantrum." Dane didn't jump in with platitudes. He just reached into his pocket and held out a mint. "It's not much," he said, "but sometimes peppermint helps." I took it, rolling the foil between my fingers before unwrapping it. "Can I say something?" he asked. I nodded. "I don't know your story. But watching you today, I'd bet everything I own that you know how to lead a crisis unit. And this room full of silk and smiles, it's not a battlefield worthy of you." I sucked on the mint. Coolness spread across my tongue. Dane leaned his forearms against the railing. "If I were you, I'd walk back in there like I was running the operation. No explanations, no apologies, just presence below us. Brittle cheer rose like bubbles, light, performative, insincere. I stood straighter. He didn't ask for thanks, just offered a casual nod before drifting back inside. I stayed a moment longer, the ocean's breath winding through my hair. I watched the water lap against the stone bluff, relentless but soft, like it knew better than to fight everything at once. I remembered the advice my mother once gave, sitting across from me at a diner the week before my first deployment. "You don't have to shout to be heard, Rowan. You just have to stand where no one expects you to." Behind me, the music shifted. A new song, a slow one, and then a voice over the mic. "We'd now like to invite the immediate family to gather for a photo." Immediate. I popped the rest of the mint in my mouth and turned toward the stairs. Near the back of the tent, past the buffet tables and the servers whispering into earpieces, I found myself next to the sound equipment station. Not by design, just drifting, looking for quiet corners between bouts of humiliation. But it wasn't the clink of champagne flutes or the strained jazz quartet that caught my attention. It was movement. 3 men in matching vests maneuvered through the corridor behind the curtain. They carried black duffels, not trays or glasses, and they moved with a rhythm that wasn't quite right. Too coordinated. Too quiet. I angled my stance, just enough to see better without drawing eyes. The bags weren't checked. No tags, no catering logos. Their hands were gloved, but it wasn't that cold. One of them turned slightly as he passed, adjusting something behind his ear. Not a Bluetooth. A tactical earpiece. Discreet. Matte black. The kind I'd seen 100 times during convoy inspections. I moved, not rushed, not obvious, but I'd spent enough years reading body language in chaos zones to know when trouble wore a uniform it hadn't earned. The hallway toward the resort's security wing twisted behind the reception hall. I slipped through with practiced ease, bypassing a pair of tipsy groomsmen trying to out-chug one another by the coat check. A discreet sign read, "Operations Office." Inside, a balding man with a radio clipped to his belt looked up from a screen filled with color-coded seating charts. "You can't be in here," he barked. "Rowan Braddock, military police, retired. You've got 3 infiltrators posing as service staff moving through the northeast sector." He blinked. "This is a private..." They're not carrying serving trays. They're carrying duffels with weight distribution too rigid for linens. One's wearing a throat mic, and unless your caterers started deploying earpieces, you've got a breach. He hesitated, radioed something low. I stepped forward, careful not to crowd him, but firm. "You may think I'm just the gate guard your team ignored, but if I'm right, you've got 10 minutes before someone decides your bride's necklace is worth more than your perimeter." His jaw clenched. The room flickered with surveillance footage, one screen after another. I pointed. "Zoom there, table 17, that's them." He stared, then began issuing commands through his radio, voice lower now, tighter. I moved to another screen. "This corridor leads to the wedding gift table. There's no checkpoint between here and the transport vehicles. They planned for this." He shot me a look. Not disbelief, unease. I don't need you to believe me, I said. I just need you to stall long enough for me to do what you should have done an hour ago. The tension in the room snapped taut. Outside, the music paused as the MC cleared his throat. Probably time for another toast. I scanned the feeds, eyes trained on details, the glint of a blade edge beneath a napkin fold, a finger tapping twice against a radio channel. Communication. Signals. They're waiting for a cue, I muttered. Something loud. A distraction. From the speakers, a loud screech broke out. Intentional or not, it served the purpose. The trio began to shift. They're moving, I warned. Security scrambled, but not fast enough. I'm going, I said. He reached out. You're not... I've been shot at in Kabul and spit on in El Paso, I snapped. I can handle Newport with a pair of loafers and a broken mic. I acted before he could object. Out in the corridor, I matched pace, blending like I'd trained to. Past the bandstand, the fire exit cracked open. One man had peeled off. I caught up just as he turned toward the loading dock. You forgot something, I said. He froze, then bolted, and I ran after him, not as the sister, not as the embarrassment, not as the girl whose name was misspelled on a chalkboard, but as someone who had trained to protect, who still knew how to move, to assess, to act. Behind me, I heard shouting, not wedding laughter, not polite clinks, real voices. And then, from somewhere far off, the pop of something falling, or maybe something starting. I was near the floral arch when I heard her heels. Laurel's cadence was unmistakable, sharp and clipped, like she'd walked across polished judgment her whole life. I didn't even have time to finish the call, just enough to whisper my name and the location to the Newport PD dispatcher before she stepped into view. You're calling the cops? She hissed, not yelling. God forbid she cause a scene, but her voice slid beneath the music like a shard of ice across skin. If you ruin this day, she said, lips curled just enough to preserve the illusion of civility, I will never forgive you. I looked at her, not flinched, not backed away, just looked. You never have, I said simply, so I'm not sure what exactly I'd be losing. Her mouth twitched, as if caught between a fake smile and something far less photogenic. She turned sharply and walked off, her train brushing past me like I wasn't even there. I waited, counting slow seconds until her figure disappeared into the tent again. Then I moved, not frantic, but deliberate. The kind of movement they teach you in the field. Be calm, be alert, don't make noise until you're ready to strike. The main reception was in full swing. String lights sparkled like overpriced constellations overhead, and clinking glasses punctuated bursts of shallow laughter. Somewhere, the DJ had finally kicked in. The music was louder now, a pulsing beat that made the floorboards throb slightly beneath my shoes. Perfect cover. I edged along the outer row of tables. 2 officers in plain clothes had arrived. They slipped in through a side entrance near the restrooms. I caught one's eye briefly, nodding. He nodded back, subtly. We had minutes, maybe. Someone had shifted the gift table, probably to make room for the dance floor, but it also opened a clear corridor to the side exit. I scanned for the infiltrators, but the crowd had grown, and everyone looked polished, celebratory, harmless, except I knew better. A hand brushed my arm. It was one of the catering staff, a younger man, probably no older than 22, with a name tag that said Gabe and eyes that had seen something. You're not part of the team, are you? He asked softly, leaning in. No, I said, matching his quiet, but I'm trying to stop something. His gaze flicked toward the loading dock. They paid some of the temp guys in cash, didn't want anyone asking questions. Did they give you a phone? He shook his head. Only them. They keep touching their collars. I gave him a grateful nod, then stepped away, melting back into the crowd just as the best man raised his champagne for a toast. Laurel stood beside her husband, glowing under the spotlight like some mythical creature bred for ballroom lighting and headlines. Our father beamed like he'd birthed the bride and the chandelier. My seat, predictably, was still beside the bathroom. I didn't go to it. Instead, I made my way to the back near the soundboard. A man was adjusting levels, not noticing the way I scanned the surroundings. I kept low, crouched near the equipment rack, and used the reflections in the polished silver casing to monitor the guests behind me. Then I saw him, one of the fake servers, bag slung under his arm. He reached beneath the table for something. I tapped my mic, borrowed from the operations room when security finally started listening. "They're prepping now," I said, eyes still on him. "Tall, Latino, navy vest. Back corner near the orchid centerpieces." "Copy that," came the low response. "Hold your position." I didn't answer, because just then another server, no, not a server, brushed past me with a metal tray. I saw it wobble slightly, too heavy, too deliberate, and I stepped into his path. He froze. I smiled. "Watch your step. Wouldn't want to spill." His mouth twitched. I leaned closer. "You know the thing about gate guards?" I said softly. "They see who goes in, but they also know when someone shouldn't be walking out." And I didn't move. I stood there, a brick wall in heels and a wine-colored dress. Behind me, the officers approached, and someone, somewhere, finally turned off the music. He brushed past me like any other guest, holding a flute of champagne and smiling too wide. But when his shoulder nudged mine, too precisely, too rehearsed, his mouth barely moved as he said, "You shouldn't stand near the spring." Sometimes the pressure shoots things out. Then he was gone. I stood still for 3 seconds, eyes fixed, lungs locked. The spring. He wasn't talking about plumbing. He meant tension. He meant a gun. That was a warning and a threat. They knew. They knew I'd spotted them, or at least suspected, and now they were letting me know it wouldn't end well if I kept playing soldier. I backed away from the corridor, heart pounding not from fear, but calculation. In combat, it wasn't the gun that killed you. It was the half-second of doubt before you decided to shoot. Right now, doubt was a luxury I couldn't afford. My feet moved on instinct toward the main hall. A string quartet played Vivaldi under chandeliers dripping with light. Guests in pastel dresses and stiff tuxedos twirled wine glasses and laughed at things they wouldn't remember. Laurel was in the center, her back straight, her smile sharp enough to slice an apple. I locked eyes with her, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to know exactly where she was. No matter how much she had cut me out of her life, I wasn't going to let her become collateral damage. A soft, warm memory flared in my chest like a match. Mom brushing hair from my eyes before my deployment, whispering, "They may not count you, honey, but that's exactly why you learn to count every piece on the board. You'll always see more than they do." Her voice steadied me. I crossed the room with casual steps, weaving through tables, pretending to study the seating chart on the wall. From the corner of my eye, I counted them. 4 men now, 2 by the far exit, 1 adjusting a camera on a tripod. The last, the one who brushed me, was standing by the bar, chatting with the DJ, who looked pale and uneasy. That was when the lights flickered once, then again. Too early. The signal was being rushed. A violin string snapped mid-note, the screech echoing like a scream. Then, pop. A single gunshot cracked the air, followed by gasps, breaking glass, a woman's sharp cry. The chandeliers dimmed, casting the room in gold-tinted shadow. Panic rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. People started to run. Laurel spun toward me, confusion widening her eyes. I lunged, grabbing her arm just as a second shot rang out, this one closer, sharper. "Down!" I barked. She dropped instinctively, and for once, just once, she didn't question me. I crouched beside her, eyes scanning. I caught movement. Bar guy was pulling something from under his jacket. Without hesitation, I grabbed a wine bottle off a table and hurled it. It crashed into his shoulder, not enough to injure, but enough to stall him. Security still hadn't moved. That's when I saw Dane. He was by the balcony, shielding a child behind a column. Our eyes met. He didn't need an explanation. He tossed me his phone. "Cameras rolling," he called. I didn't know what he'd captured, but my fingers moved fast, flipping it to record. I turned it toward Bar Guy just as he pulled his weapon fully into view. Finally, the head of security moved. His team emerged from the service door, guns raised, shouting commands. Guests hit the ground. A man in a tuxedo vomited into a punch bowl. Bar Guy saw the guards and dropped the weapon, hands in the air, like he'd never meant it, like it had all been a misunderstanding. But I had the footage now, and I had a voice, even if, until now, no one had wanted to hear it. I turned back to Laurel. Her makeup was smudged, hair falling from its pins. Her mouth opened, but she couldn't speak. I wasn't sure if it was fear or recognition. I stood, handing the phone to a security officer, my voice steady. 4 suspects, armed. 1 weapon recovered, likely more. Cameras caught everything. He blinked. Who are you?" I stared at him and answered without hesitation. "I'm the one who didn't wait for you to listen." I didn't wait. As the lights blinked in and out and the air filled with that sharp metallic scent of panic, I moved toward the left wing of the stage. My heels barely touched the carpet. I'd studied the layout earlier, emergency exits, service hallways, the curve of the staircase, and now every step followed a map my mind had already drawn. He was heading for the head table, slim build, dark vest, earpiece tucked behind his curls, one of the 4. I saw his right hand twitch toward his hip. My breath thinned. I counted 2 seconds. Then I sprinted. The velvet curtain swallowed me for a beat before I burst through on the far end behind him. He didn't hear me. His focus was forward, on Laurel, on the table of gifts and champagne, on whatever target he'd been assigned. I gave no warning, no question. I tackled him from behind, dropped him hard to the floor, and drove my knee into his spine before he could register what hit him. His arm shot back, reaching, until I yanked it up and locked it against his shoulder blade. His weapon clattered under the stage. My elbow jammed into his ribs. I heard gasps, chairs scraping. Laurel's shriek split the room. Then, a blinding white burst flashed across the room. Dane. He'd circled to the opposite side, camera in hand, and now he fired rapid strobes of light like flares, each one forcing eyes toward me, disorienting the man beneath me, pulling focus in the only direction it needed to go. We never spoke, didn't have to. His light became my cover, my distraction, my witness. Security finally rushed in, too late to stop me, early enough to look useful. They swarmed the man as I backed off, sweat prickling my spine under the thin fabric of my dress uniform. Somewhere behind the pulsing confusion, the chandeliers flared back to life. The room exhaled, and then I saw Laurel. She stood at the base of the stairs, frozen. Her veil had come loose, tangled in a candelabra. Her lipstick smeared. There was a streak of red down her arm. Not hers, I realized, but from the man I'd taken down. Still, it made her look like something from a Greek tragedy, blood-splashed and silenced. I stepped toward her, not cautiously, not boldly, just steadily. We locked eyes. "You don't have to say my name," I said. "You never have. But when bullets start flying, I'm still the one who'll stand between you and them." Her lips parted. Nothing came out. I didn't expect it to. The room had quieted, like air had been siphoned out, like we were all underwater. Then a voice broke through. It came from an older man near the cake table. White-haired, sharp posture, medals on his chest even in a civilian tux. He walked to the stage, took the mic from a dazed wedding planner who clearly hadn't signed up for combat. He tapped the mic once, then looked at me. "I don't know most of you here," he said, "but I know a field commission when I see one. That woman didn't just act. She led. She assessed, intervened, and saved your damn lives." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He pointed toward me, voice gaining force. "We call her Colonel Rowan, and she just saved your damn wedding." Silence, thick as velvet. Somewhere, a glass dropped and shattered. Someone clapped, then another. Applause surged up like a tide, hesitant at first, then swelling. Not loud, not roaring, but enough to be heard, enough to shift the axis of the room. Laurel didn't clap. She didn't have to. Her eyes said what her mouth never did. She saw me, not the gate guard, not the afterthought. Me. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there letting the weight of every slam door, every birthday forgotten, every seat at the table left empty, for me, settle into something heavier than shame, but lighter than rage. Recognition. Behind me, Dane approached, camera lowered. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. "I'm fine," I murmured, adjusting the cuff of my jacket. "Just wasn't expecting to go tactical in heels." His chuckle was soft. "I'll make sure the footage doesn't catch your expression when you toss that guy like a sack of laundry." "You better," I said. My jaw was doing things I didn't authorize. He tilted his head. "You think she'll ever say it?" "Call you by name?" I didn't answer, because it didn't matter anymore. The room already had. Richard stepped out from behind the stone column, his hands locked behind his back as if he were still inspecting cadets instead of watching his daughter survive a gunfight. He hadn't clapped when the colonel named me. He hadn't moved when the weapons hit the floor. But now, with the cameras being packed away and the crowd thinning, he walked straight toward me. I kept my posture straight. My breathing had slowed. I could feel the adrenaline slipping out of my muscles, one cell at a time. That's when I saw him. My father, Richard, stood at the edge of the ballroom, half hidden behind a stone column, hands clasped tightly behind his back. He hadn't approached when the colonel introduced me. He hadn't clapped. He hadn't even flinched when the gun went off. Now, with the cameras being packed up and the guests losing interest, he finally moved toward me. He didn't say my name. He didn't offer a word of acknowledgement. Instead, he leaned slightly in, lowering his voice like we were conspiring. "You humiliated everyone," he muttered, eyes scanning the crowd. "You couldn't just stay quiet and let your sister have her moment." I blinked once. "Her moment?" I asked quietly. He straightened his jacket. "This was supposed to be her perfect day. And you—" "There were men with guns in the building," I cut in, sharply but calm. "Would you rather they succeeded? That Laurel's moment came with a headline and a body count?" He didn't answer, just pursed his lips and looked past me, like searching for a reasonable excuse to escape the conversation. But I didn't let him go. "You've never looked at me when it mattered," I said, no louder than him. "Never once. Not after I graduated from basic, not after the commission, not even when Mom said goodbye to me at the bus stop and you stayed in the kitchen frying eggs like it was just another Tuesday." "I didn't want this, Rowan," he said. His tone shifted, less angry now, more weary. I didn't want to have to explain. Every time someone asks me what you do, I get that look, like they don't know what box to put you in, like I raised a... He stopped himself. "Say it," I prompted. "Go ahead." He didn't. He exhaled hard. "You always have to push. Always need to make it about you. That's why it's so hard. You can't just fit in. Fit into what, Dad?" The silence? The script where I nod at Laurel's speeches and disappear before the toast? You wanted daughters who could be trophies. You got a lawyer and a soldier, and only one of those fit on your shelf. His jaw twitched. "I don't hate you," he said finally. "I just don't want to have to explain who you are to people who expect something else. People don't understand women like you. They think you're trouble." I took a breath that didn't reach my lungs. "You don't have to explain me," I said. "You never have. You've barely even tried to understand me. You decided I was trouble the moment I said I didn't want to be a part of the family photo wearing pastel. And every time I stood a little taller, you flinched like it meant you had less room in the frame." He looked older suddenly, smaller. "You could have worn something softer," he said, almost to himself. You didn't have to show up in uniform." "I wore what I had," I said, voice like gravel, "because I came straight from base. Because I wasn't even sure I wanted to be here. Because I thought maybe, for once, I'd be treated like I was wanted, not handled." Richard rubbed his temple as if I were a migraine that refused to fade. Then, quietly, as if he were offering me a gift, "You should go. You've done enough." A pause. "And I suppose I should thank you for whatever that was." "Rescue," I said. "That's what it was. I rescued your guests, your daughter, and you. You didn't rescue me." "No," I agreed. "I stopped trying years ago." He nodded. It wasn't approval, it was retreat. Then he turned, blending into the clumps of guests now drifting back toward the buffet as if the night had simply rebooted. I stood there, still, the echo of our conversation sticking to my skin like damp smoke. The words we didn't say louder than the ones we did. I had faced insurgents with less venom than that whisper. And the most terrifying part? He didn't hate me. He erased me. I slipped past the buffet table and out toward the south lawn before anyone could ask for a quote. The air smelled of rain and dandelions pushing through the trimmed grass. My boots carried me down the slope until the noise of the ballroom dulled to a hum. That was when I noticed Dane behind me, his camera bag swinging at his side, a printout folded in his hand. I stayed back, quiet, slipping out toward the south lawn. No one noticed me past the buffet table. No one offered another thank you. That was fine. I wasn't waiting for applause. Beyond the pergola, down a small slope behind the resort, the grass turned rougher, dotted with patches of wild dandelions that had survived landscaping. I walked until I reached the wooden fence that lined the edge of the property. Weathered, leaning, half swallowed by ivy, I sat down on the lowest rung. Just me. The smell of rain in the air and the distant whine of a generator somewhere behind the tent. The fabric of my uniform stuck slightly to my back, damp from sweat and effort. I exhaled slowly, letting my muscles release one by one, like peeling out of armor I'd forgotten I was wearing. A moment later, I heard footsteps, measured, unsure. Dane approached from behind, not speaking. He knelt beside me, pulled something from inside his camera case, and placed it on the fence post between us. It was a laminated printout, the seating chart from the reception. My eyes scanned it. There it was. My name. Or at least the shadow of it. It had clearly been typed, printed, and then crossed out by hand. Laurel's elegant calligraphy had looped around everyone else's names, each placement circled with care. Mine was a faint ghost under a swath of correction fluid. "You weren't supposed to be there, were you?" Dane asked, voice soft. "I was," I said, "but not as myself." He didn't answer, just sat down beside me, our shoulders not quite touching. "They're calling you a hero," he said after a long pause. "Some guy with a podcast is already narrating the security footage like it's a war film." I shrugged. "Let them. I'm not giving them a quote." Dane tilted his head toward me. "Why not?" I traced a line in the dirt with my boot. "Because if I speak, it becomes a story. If I stay silent, it stays a fact. There's a difference." Footsteps again. Heavier this time. More hesitant. Laurel. She came down the slope slowly, clutching the hem of her designer dress to avoid the wet grass. I didn't stand up. Neither did Dane. She stopped a few feet from us, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes darting between me and the laminated chart still resting on the wood. "They're asking who you are," she said, not quite meeting my gaze. "The reporters." The guests. Everyone. I let the silence sit between us. Then I said, without looking up, "Tell them I'm the gate guard." She flinched slightly. "But this time," I continued, "the gate was between this party and a funeral." And I stayed at my post. Laurel's lip trembled, just barely. She didn't apologize. That would have been too easy, too late. But something in her expression cracked, like she finally saw me not as an accessory to be managed, but as something undeniable. She reached out almost reflexively to take the seating chart. I stopped her hand with mine, just for a breath. "Leave it," I said. "It belongs in the record." She nodded once and stepped back, retreating the way she came. A moment later, the soft hum of tires on gravel signaled the approach of a military jeep. It pulled up just beyond the tree line, unassuming but unmistakable. I stood. Dane looked up at me. "You sure you don't want to go back in?" "They'll be announcing the rescheduled toast soon." I smirked. "I think I've toasted enough for one lifetime." He grinned, but there was a flicker of something else behind his eyes. Admiration, maybe, or grief for something I never had. I didn't ask. He didn't offer. I walked toward the Jeep, my boots kicking up small bursts of dust. The cameras caught me then, by accident. One swung around just as I passed through a shaft of late afternoon sun. The shot was grainy, distant but clear enough to see the patch on my sleeve. Colonel. Not security. Not staff. Not just visiting. Not invisible. And I didn't say a word. I just opened the door, climbed in, and let the gate close behind me. The clip hit the internet before dawn. Someone had captured the exact moment I dropped the man by the cake table. His arm twisted behind him, the glint of something tucked into his waistband, and my boots planted wide like I'd done it 100 times before. Which, of course, I had. The caption read, "She's not just a gate guard." By morning, it had 500,000 views. By noon, local news anchors were playing it between weather reports and sports scores, their voices tinged with half-curious reverence. "Colonel Rowan Scott, formerly stationed in Kandahar," they began. As if that version of me had always been part of their vocabulary. A formal apology came next, from the resort. I received it via email, all polished regret and embossed headers. They blamed a clerical oversight for the erased name on the seating chart, said my experience had fallen short of their commitment to excellence. I didn't reply. I never believed in their version of excellence anyway. Later that same afternoon, someone quietly updated the wedding program on the event website. It now listed me as Colonel Rowan Scott at Table 1, right next to the couple, between the maid of honor and the officiant. I saw the change. I didn't go back. Richard, of course, said nothing. He was good at that. Silence had always been his cleanest weapon. He could wound without moving a muscle. But this time, something shifted. He didn't object when Laurel went live on her own account. She appeared on screen without makeup, in a plain gray sweatshirt sitting in what looked like her laundry room. There was no music, no filter, just her and the quiet scrape of throat clearing before she spoke. "My sister saved lives," she said, "and I let people think she was nothing." A pause. My silence was cowardice. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would stay tidy. But she never asked for that. She didn't ask for anything. I watched it once, then closed my phone. I didn't post a reply. I didn't forward it. I didn't text back when extended family started checking in with lukewarm praise wrapped in self-preserving curiosity. "Wow, didn't realize you were still in service." "You were amazing. What branch again?" I let the notifications die quietly. There was only one message I reread. It came from a number saved under Mom, home, though she hadn't lived in that house for years. "Mom said you were strong. You were right. Always right." I stayed up thinking about that, about the way some sentences carry warmth like broth, something you don't chew, just let settle. The next morning, I didn't put on my uniform. I pulled on jeans, a soft sweater I'd nearly thrown away last spring, and drove across town. The streets were still glazed with dew. The air smelled like jasmine and exhaust. I parked outside a tiny corner cafe with dusty window panes and chairs that wobbled slightly on the uneven tile floor. The kind of place that hadn't changed its menu since I was 16, where I once sat in silence with my mother, week after week, eating French toast like it was currency for not causing trouble. She was already there. She wore the same cardigan she always did when she didn't know how to dress for something important. Her hair was pinned back with a clip I recognized from a drawer in her old vanity. She stood when I approached, like she wanted to hug me but couldn't decide if I'd want that. I opened my arms. She stepped in. We sat by the window, ordered 2 coffees. The same booth, same sugar packets in the chipped ceramic bowl, and I spoke. Not about the wedding, not about Richard, but about my deployments and what Afghanistan smelled like after rain, about the time I nearly froze my fingers off in Fairbanks because a junior officer forgot to refill the truck's coolant, about the night I broke up a bar fight between 2 guys who were fighting over which MASH character they'd marry. My mother laughed. Not big belly laughs, but soft, startled chuckles, like she was trying out the sound again. "You've seen so much," she said. I nodded. "And you never brought any of it home." I shrugged. Didn't think home wanted it. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin felt warm. Her thumb traced the edge of the scar near my wrist. "It does now," she said. Outside, the world went on. Inside, I kept talking. The night air wrapped around me like a faded blanket, soft and familiar. Not cold, not warm, just enough to remind me I was alive. I leaned back in the aluminum chair stationed outside the east gate of the base, my boots planted in gravel, the faint crunch still echoing from the last patrol that passed through. I hadn't worn dress blues since the wedding. Tonight, I wore the same camo I always did. The fabric smelled faintly of dust and machine oil, and I found comfort in that. Familiar gear. Predictable hours. Quiet, mostly. A rookie sat 2 chairs down, a lanky kid from Georgia who hadn't stopped bouncing his knee since we rotated in. He glanced sideways, hesitant, like he was working up the courage to poke a sleeping bear. "You really saved a wedding?" he finally blurted, as if the question had been bubbling for hours. I didn't look at him at first, just studied the distant perimeter lights blinking in rhythm. "Depends who you ask," I said. He shifted. "They said you took down one of the suspects yourself." Alone, I shrugged. It was crowded. People panicked. Someone had to do something. "So, it's true?" I glanced at him now, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "I was just guarding a gate, same as always." He laughed nervously, then settled into silence. The wind picked up for a second, rustling through the low pine trees just outside the fence line. A moth danced around the spotlight above us. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yelped, then stopped. I found myself thinking about Laurel. Not the wedding, not the cameras, but a moment long before all that. She must have been 7, maybe 8. She'd built a museum in our backyard with paper signs and rocks she'd decided were fossils. I had to pay 2 dimes to get in. I remember kneeling to peer at her exhibits while she stood proudly in a plastic tiara. She'd called me her first visitor, her big, brave sister. The memory caught me off guard. I let it sit, unexamined, like a letter I wasn't ready to open. They'd asked me to come back, Laurel and the family. They even offered a framed photo of the wedding with everyone signed in gold ink. I didn't return it. I didn't hang it either, but I didn't throw it away. You can choose the weight you carry, even if you can't always choose who hands it to you. The rookie got up to stretch his legs, still buzzing with green energy. I envied that a little. That twitchy restlessness of someone who hasn't yet been forced to stand still in the middle of a mess, with no one telling you what to do, only your own voice asking if you'll rise. I checked my watch. Still 2 hours left on shift. The world kept turning. That was the thing, wasn't it? Time moved forward whether or not anyone gave you a parade. At 0400, the Jeep would arrive, and I'd log my rotation. The next set of boots would take my place, and I'd hand over the logbook without ceremony, just like I always did. But I would leave a note, just a line in the margin, almost invisible. Gate secure, sky clear. Hold fast, it wasn't for anyone else, just something I liked to see in the dark. As dawn crept in, the edge of the sky turned a muted lavender. Soft light seeped through the trees, dappling the ground in long stripes. I could smell morning in the dirt. My name badge caught the glow. Lieutenant Colonel R. Quinn. No footnote. No joke. No label I didn't choose. For years, I tried to be invisible. Then for a while, I tried to be undeniable. Now I was just present. There was no audience, no champagne glasses, no applause or microaggressions wrapped in silk, just this small patch of land I was trusted to watch over, and the stillness of knowing no one had to see me for me to matter. The rookie returned with 2 steaming cups from the mess. He handed me one wordlessly, then sat down again. We drank in silence. And in that quiet moment, no ceremony, no noise, I realized I didn't need the gate to open for me anymore. Because somewhere along the way, I'd built my own. Maybe I was never meant to stand at the center of their spotlight, just to hold the line when no one else would. But sometimes being underestimated is the best cover a woman could ask for. You get to move quietly, observe everything, and when the moment comes, you change the story entirely. So here's what I'm left wondering. What happens when the one guarding the gate realizes she's also been holding the key all along? If you've ever been sidelined, silenced, or seen only through someone else's version of who you should be, this story was for you. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more voices that were never supposed to be heard, but speak anyway.